Welcome to episode number 65 of Unbuckling the Bible Bit podcast. I'm Joe Kindick.
And I'm Sharon Bush.
No, but so it's just going to be Sharon and I tonight. Like the good old days.
Rolling along. Yeah. Back in the day.
I know. It's like when I used to like you. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. I never liked you.
I'm glad to know there was a time.
No, I'm kidding. I never liked you. I never learned to read. So we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about. There's bills and stuff in place for women to have to bury their children they had if they had a miscarriage or an abortion, which is
crazy.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
It's stupid face is what it is.
I mean, are you going to bury a blastocyst that's 4 cells big? Whenever you have that abortion,
it's not the size of the cells, but how you use them. So
I guess so.
Yeah, I don't get it. It's just trying to guilt trip women, and then kind of punishing them by having an abortion by making them pay for a fucking funeral. That shit ain't cheap.
I can see the coffin I'd have now if I had like a 6 weeks into my pregnancy and I had an abortion. I'd buy like a box that a ring would come in. That would be the coffin I would buy.
I think it'd be just go buy yourself a new pair of shoes and then use the shoebox.
Oh, that'd be too big.
I know it would be.
I was thinking jewelry.
But just justify it. Oh, I had to buy new shoes for the shoebox to put my abortion in. I wonder if that's going to apply to dudes, though, or like every time I masturbate, am I going to have to bury a sock or something? or like a trillion socks? But
or like, well, Cliff and I had the conversation last night. He does it in the shower, so he doesn't have any cleanup.
I can't do it in the shower. It's so I don't know if it's just so cliched or what, but I just cannot masturbate in the shower.
I don't know. Cliff and I had the conversation because he's a truck driver now, and I'm like, so what do you do whenever you're out on the road and you're horny? And he's
Calls
like,
Adam
oh,
Collins.
I just, yeah. He's like, oh, I just masturbate in the shower. No cleanup.
Yeah, but he's on the road, so he's masturbating in the showers, or the other dudes are masturbating in the showers. And I'm not going the gay angle here. I'm going in the I don't want to step in your semen while I'm taking a fucking shower, bro angle.
I mentioned that to him. He was like, no, they clean it after every shower.
You know why? Because dudes are in there beating off. My army buddy used to call them, when they would jerk off in the shower, they would leave, what do they call them? Oh, jellyfish. Watch out for jellyfish.
Oh, gross.
Exactly.
Well, this intro went way off the tracks.
Yeah, it's what you do. That's it's not. None of that's me. That's all you. That's all.
I know.
100% you. I have nothing to do with that.
All right, folks. That's going to be our show tonight. Beating off in the shower.
Hashtag America.
See you in a little while.
See you guys.
So the thing is now that states are trying to pass laws that women have to bury their aborted babies or their miscarried babies, whether they want to or not. I think it's a really dumb idea because I think it's the right's way of trying to get women to feel bad about their abortion or their miscarriage for whatever reason.
You think that's what that is?
I think it's what it is because they can no longer make you feel bad by limiting where you get your abortions at, because the Supreme Court has said that you can have abortions, that Roe versus Wade stands, and that abortion clinics don't have to follow the same mandates as hospitals, and so that's going to allow abortion clinics to stay open. So I think what it is the right is scrambling for a way to try to penalize women for having an abortion or for miscarrying a child for whatever reason, and this is their last-ditch effort in finding a way to just shame a woman, is by making them have to pay for a funeral and acknowledge a child that they may not have wanted in the first place, that they aborted, that they don't want. What do you think?
No, I'm 100% with you on that one. I mean, who wants kids? No, it's definitely a shame tactic, I think, or maybe it's if you're indigent or something, if you can scrape by the money, if you can scrape up the money to pay for an abortion, you won't be able to pay for the funeral that attaches. I'm sure they'll throw some kind of bullshit penalty on there.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it's definitely a backhanded tactic.
And women who miscarry are more than likely, if you miscarry, I know just from personal experience of friends who have miscarried, they wanted a funeral for their baby because it was not their choice to abort their baby. So I see in cases of miscarrying that women would want to have a funeral for their baby because it's not their choice to spontaneously abort that child. But it's like lawmakers are trying to find a way to penalize women who miscarry too, because in so many states now, if you miscarry and there's a sign of you having done drugs whenever you were pregnant, or there's a thought that you may have drank whenever you're pregnant, you could be thrown in jail. Did you know about that?
In Tennessee, we've had that rule.
Yeah. But it's become more widespread across the country. And I think it's okay if you have done drugs that you be penalized for it, that you go to jail after you have a baby if that's the reason the baby miscarried. But, I mean...
That's a slippery slope, though.
Yeah, I was going to say it is a slippery slope, because when do you... you may have done drugs and not known you were pregnant, and still you have to go to jail for it.
Right, because I know in Tennessee that we had this law come out this last year, I think, that if the baby had drugs in his bloodstream, the mother went to jail immediately. Yeah,
that's pretty much become what all states are legislating. And they test the mothers in some states, if I'm not mistaken, they test the mothers before they go into labor to see if there's any drugs in their system.
I think they tested my wife for that reason.
Well, it's good to know she passed.
Yeah. I'm the one that has all the vices. Her only vice is Jesus. I tell her that, too.
Jesus is a pretty big vice to have.
I know. I'd much rather her vice be lesbian three-ways, but whatever.
That would be a nice vice.
Yes. It'd be an Edelweiss. I don't know what that means.
Edelweiss is a little white flower.
It is.
Yeah.
And so is her vagina.
A little white flower. I would hope it'd be pink.
It is when I'm done with it. Oh, wait.
That's red.
I beat that thing pink. It's just, it's like rare meat. I'm done with it. It's got a good char on the outside.
We're awful.
Yeah, you're a terrible person for just allowing me to joke like that.
Well, back to abortions, which...
Yes, let's get back to abortions, which we all know and love.
We all love abortions. Well, if you and your wife had decided to have an abortion, choosing to end that child's life, would you have wanted to have a funeral for it? Because I would not have.
Fuck no. Exactly.
I was pregnant at 17 and gave serious thought to an abortion, which I didn't have, but if I had, it wouldn't have been... I would not have wanted to commemorate the life of a child I didn't want in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So, hope she's not here to hear you say that.
No, she knows I wanted her. That's why I kept her. But she's not here.
I've never had an abortion, so I don't know. I would assume that... I can tell you, if I had an abortion, I wouldn't want to commemorate. I might commemorate it with a gold plaque, like a dude shooting at me and it's like, bullet dodged, or something like that.
Dodge that bullet.
Dodge that bullet. Because I'm, keeping it classy.
Yeah.
So. I wonder who's making money off. Someone's going to be making money off it, though. Just think about it. Like the funeral home people. Oh, yeah, I'm going to charge you $6,000 to bury this diamond ring box, like you said.
Yeah. This little tiny clump of cells that isn't anything right now. We're going to charge you the same amount as we would a full-grown adult to bury.
They just cremate him with a match, though. They just light a match and cremates.
That's done.
That'll be $500. Yeah.
Yeah. $75 for that.
We had to put our dog down, one of the dogs down Friday. It was $250 fucking dollars, dude. I'm like, dude, a 22 costs like 0.04 cents, or it used to. I don't know. I guess it's against the law now. You just can't shoot your dogs.
Well, it's just in the city limits. If you lived in the country, you could pull an old yeller.
Well, all I had was my shotgun anyway. It's a little loud.
I've been watching Family Guy like nonstop from season 1, episode 1, all the way to season 13, I think it is.
Well, that explains a lot.
And they shoot dogs in there all the time. So I guess I've become desensitized to it. It doesn't bother me to think about it.
It doesn't bother me either. Whatever. Things have to die.
Yeah, but I don't know. It makes me sad to think about shooting my own dogs. Like, my Xena has the mange right now. And, oh my God. How did she get the mange?
I don't know. Maybe you're nasty. I don't know.
I'm not nasty.
I don't know.
So
I don't even know what the mange is, technically.
You don't? It's a
No, it's like a skin disease or something.
Yeah, it's a skin disease. But, I don't know. I felt like giving her up the other day just because she's turning into this scabby... I don't know. I felt like maybe she'd be better off dead.
Wow. They actually have medicine for the mange?
I know, but I'm giving it to her. It's not doing anything.
Sounds like you just want to kill your dog.
No.
That's what I'm getting out of this conversation.
I don't want to kill my dog.
I mean, I get it. I don't like your dog either, but... I mean, I don't know your dog, but if I did, I have a feeling that I wouldn't care.
So loving.
It's my thing. I'm a giver.
So
would you bury your dog if it had an abortion?
Would I bury my dog if it had an abortion? If it was still alive, probably not. She'd probably be better off alive if she had an abortion. I wonder if dogs can have an abortion.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I know they can spontaneously abort, like any living creature can, but are there vets that do dog abortions?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a surgical procedure. It's a medical procedure. I mean, just like any abortion that a human being gets, doctors know how to perform them.
I guess so. I guess there would be medical reasons for dogs to have abortions.
Oh, yeah. Like, she got knocked up by the non-pure breed dog, and you're trying to set her up. I've actually heard of people doing that. I don't know anyone who's personally done that, but breeders will do that. Like, if people like want to breed dogs and they get knocked up by like something that they weren't planning on getting, they'll have abortions for that.
Something I didn't know.
Speaking of things that should have been aborted,
there's your dog.
Oh, worst mistake I ever made.
So you only have one dog now? You had two?
Nope, we had 3, so 2 down. I mean, 1 down, 2 to go. Well, maybe 1 to go. I'm trying to give 1 to my brother because he's good with bulldog types, and then we'll keep the other one because he's a good boy. He's a better boy, I should say. And then after that, no more animals. I mean, I got 2 chinchillas to my left, just chinchilling out.
Chinchilling out.
You like that? That was pretty stupid.
It was.
Yeah, I'm just chinchilling.
Pretty funny.
Thanks for saying that. It wasn't, but thank you for saying that.
Well, I guess it's a good place to end this segment because we have gone off the rails completely.
Yeah, we're good for that. That's what we do. All right, see ya.
Welcome back to Unbuckling the Bible Belt. This is episode 65, and we're just me and Kate, but we got some special guests up in his house. Let's get it on. It's going to be a fun night, people.
Oh my goodness, yes. You have no idea. I mean, this was like last minute, but it worked out well. Matt Kovacs, he's director of Who Do They Say That I Am podcast, and also it's now going to be a documentary special through NPR. I believe it's like an audio document. Or no, I think it is video. We'll get into that in a minute. But we've got him on board. He reached out to us tonight to see if we'd be interested. And also, it turns out he was also, or still is currently, a podcaster with Miami Valley Skeptics. Is that correct, Matt?
No, we ended that podcast about a year ago. We can definitely find all of our archive episodes at MiamiValleySkeptics.com.
Good deal, good deal. So we'll make sure we still have the appropriate, links to that in there. Because sometimes I don't think it matters how old it is when it comes to these kind of discussions. I think some of them are kind of timeless and dateless.
And outside of that, people, we have a local guy from the backwoods of Tennessee. Let's welcome in Tucker Drake.
Howdy.
Where's the cat, man?
Curled up inside my coat, giving himself a bath.
Oh, my God. I can visualize that.
And I'm wearing the coat because otherwise he'd be in my face.
Oh, jeez. So you've got a pocket moving around. Oh,
Yep.
my. This would be a moment for Sharon to make a comment, but we'll just lay where it is.
Yeah, we're going to go on from there. And then we got the sexiest man to rock a desk ever, Adam Collins. Come on, brother.
Oh, you quit it, Adam Fusion. I'm all right, I guess.
That was the hottest thing I've ever seen.
You're not the first to say that, but I don't get what the appeal is, but people like it, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Fuck it.
You rock a mangina like no man ever has before in an entire history of humans.
Making me blush over here, dude.
Hey, and if people can't get enough of that mangina, they can check out your podcast, Adam and Atheism, right?
Yeah, it's still going pretty strong. I'm on my 7th episode now. In the middle of recording the 8th one. It'll be out this weekend. So, yeah, just another white, cisgendered, straight dude doing another atheist podcast. Nothing new to see here.
Oh, we got all sidetracked with that pussy in Tucker's pocket, but come on, Tucker, you better plug yours while we're all talking.
Yep, might as well, brother.
Well, I just do the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm a simple man.
Simple man with a cat in his pocket. So anyway, we're all gathered here tonight because apparently, as I was saying, there is a documentary coming out that Matt Kovacs, our special guest tonight, is the director of. And, I kind of, when he first approached me, I thought, oh, great, here we go again. I'll be honest, Matt, I was like, man, it's another Jesus documentary. Another one. And it's not quite that from the way you were describing it, because I know I was kind of picking your brain a little hard there in the messenger when we were speaking back and forth about it. So let's get into what is your documentary about?
Well, it's basically the search for the identity of the historical Jesus. And like you and I talked back and forth before we went on this podcast.
Yes!
The term historical Jesus is a very loaded term with a lot of baggage. So it's not as simple as, well, who's the historical Jesus? And so I said, what we sought to do is define historical Jesus. And we've talked to dozens of scholars from around the planet. And I think the most simplest definition I could find for the historical Jesus that we pieced together was who Jesus' first followers thought that he was. And that kind of answers, because if you get to that, then you answer the question of mythicism, historicity, theology. So that's kind of what we're seeking to discover is who did his first followers think that he was?
Well, I was just going to ask, who do you consider to be his first followers?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too, because the first writings about Jesus outside of the New Testament are 65 years after he was already gone?
Well, probably the earliest writings we have, even in the New Testament, were probably 40 to 60 years after he was already gone, if he was already gone. Mm-hmm. So again, that's the question, is who his first followers was. So that's the second stage of trying to figure that out, because were his first followers some fishermen from Galilee? Were his first followers people like Paul? Were his first followers people at the turn of the first century who were starting a movement? So that's why I say that's where the answer lies, because even if we could say with confidence Jesus historically existed, you can't say with confidence who Jesus thought he was, because he didn't write anything down if he did exist. The only thing you can say with confidence is how people interpreted him after his death, if he did have a death.
Now, I was curious, Are you setting the social backdrop for this with the time period with these people, the politics of the time? I mean, are you setting the backdrop for the surroundings? Because, I mean, it's like, I'd written my own interpretation of his ministry, and I found as I was writing, it was really key to understand who he might be or how he's interpreted our social situations, was really looking at the politics of the time, the key players of the time when he supposedly existed or when they were writing about him.
Absolutely, and that's what a lot of the theology gets lost. If you try to find the theological Jesus. Jesus lived in a first century Palestine state controlled by Rome. When
Right.
little things like when we say Son of Man or Son of God, we interpret that through the lens of a 21st century person in a culture of Christianity. How would a first century Jew understand the term Son of Man? How would a first century Jew understand the term Son of God? And to really dig beyond that level of just basic theology, you have to understand that concept. When, like, even the term gospel, we interviewed Adela Collins, who explained to us how would a first century Jew or first century Greek understand the term gospel. It wasn't a genre of literature. And Mark is probably the first person to really use the term gospel in a way where he's talking about writing things down. So if you're hearing this term for the first time, how would you interpret it? And that's kind of what you have to do to peel back all these layers of this onion and find out, again, going back to what did Mark think Jesus meant when he said, I am the Son of Man? What did Paul think Jesus meant when he said, I am the Son of God? Because you have to understand, like you said, the politics, the culture of that time.
Wow.
So do you address any of the theories that the individual that Jesus is based on was somebody who lived, say, late 2nd century, early 1st century BC?
Are you talking about Lena Einhorn?
I'm not familiar with her.
Josephus has this very strange passage he writes about this Egyptian messianic prophet who lived probably around 60 to 70 CE. And she argues that was probably Jesus. And Jesus lived 60, 70 CE, and this Egyptian prophet was really Jesus and what the Jesus legend was based off of. I'm not familiar with any 2nd century hypothesis.
This is BCE, not CE.
Oh, BCE. I'm sorry. BCE.
Yeah.
I misheard.
Because I know that one of the books I've read on the subject, I can't pronounce the guy's name right. It's like Antonius Matthias, who, anyways, it was the king that Herod deposed. There's some who argue that he was the inspiration for Jesus. There's Yeshua, who is mentioned in the Torah, the Talmud, and then the other one that I know of from around that period that we don't know really anything about him, is the founder of the Essene sect at Nag Hammadi, or not at Qumran. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Who was known in the writings as the teacher of righteousness.
Well, interesting you brought up the Essenes. A scholar we talked to argued that John the Baptist was an Essene, and if John the Baptist and Jesus, throughout some of the earlier traditions, has some hints of Essene teachings. I don't know of any scholar who argues that the righteous leader that you're talking about, the Essenes, was actually Jesus. I'm not familiar with that argument.
I would say at the most maybe Jesus deposed that leader, because the story of John the Baptist kind of comes across that way with the way he kind of left John to rot in jail and talked about him as being already dead. So
well, the sect at Qumran was located like a couple of miles from where John the Baptist was supposedly baptizing people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely debated. James Tabor is who you're talking about. He argues he found this cave about where John the Baptist could have baptized people, but that's one of the fringe theories out there. That's not really accepted archaeology, things like that.
But on the topic, though, of fringe theories, because James Tabor is one of the people that you interviewed.
Correct.
Who all would you say? I mean, it sounds like you got a good variety. You've got, like, fringe, and you have more, conservative focused really trying to work with what they actually can find and not overreaching. How did you come up with your list of people? Was it just people happen to say yes? I'm just curious.
Well, we started at just a baseline. Like, for example, we interviewed, if you're familiar with Frank Turek, the theologian, and he gave an argument about the Gospel of John, where he says, in the Gospel of John, it's John 19, where Jesus is crucified, and the centurion spears Jesus. We all know this story if you've seen the Passion of the Christ, and water comes out. And in John, it says water and blood came out, and I write this so you know this is you can trust the testimony, in essence, that I'm telling you water and blood, so you can trust the testimony. And Turek argued that no uneducated Jew would have known that unless they actually saw it, because it wasn't common knowledge that when you're crucified, your lungs would fill with water. So I found an expert. She has done extensive research on crucifixion. She studied what the body would go through during crucifixion, and she said, yes, the trauma you would go through as you're suffocating, your lungs would fill with water and blood, so if you would be pierced, water would come out. So if that was the case, that this would be an uncommon thing for somebody to know, that means John's source, at least his source, had some eyewitness tradition or some tradition that, the other Gospels didn't have. And then does that mean John moves up from 90 to 100 CE to even earlier, his writing? So then we found somebody, James McGrath, who wrote his doctoral dissertation on the dating of John. And we contacted him and said, hey, these are the arguments this guy gave us. What would you say about that? And then he gave a really good rebuttal as to why John can't be any earlier than 90 CE. So that's kind of how we found the expert. Someone made a claim, then we found someone who's an expert in that claim and heard their rebuttal or why that's unlikely.
That's cool.
Okay, I'm just a little confused here because crucifixion was a public form of execution. So anybody who was in a Roman-occupied city could have seen it. It wasn't like that they would have, not necessarily seen Jesus be executed, but it would have been something familiar. I mean, that was sort of the entertainment of that time period, was to, go see the public execution. Also, now my source on this dates from the 19th century, so it may not be quite as accurate, but at least according to it, at the time that Jesus was supposed to have been crucified, the term crucifixion actually applied to a number of different execution methods, and as I recall, some of the argument is in the Gospels, the way it's not described as a crucifixion as we describe it. They just use the word crucifixion, and there's actually a couple of other different methods that could have been used that would have
had
some...
Like a tree and a pole and hanging them upside down and all that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Right. So, I know that, like, Bart Ehrman, in an interview I heard with him, he was talking about how he assumed that the scene at the tomb was an inaccurate retelling of something that actually did happen. That maybe it was, they had gathered there to mourn Jesus, and then somebody embellished it to say that, no, Jesus showed up. And then he did research and found that, no, it couldn't have happened at all because they didn't allow people who'd been crucified to be buried. They left them up on, the cross or whatever they used to execute them until their bodies rotted off. Because the horror of that time period was being deprived of a decent burial. I mean, so, you were punished twice. You had to suffer on the cross, and then you weren't allowed to be buried.
Yeah, that's a big section of the documentary we discuss, is if Jesus was allowed off the cross, even then would he be buried? And there's interesting discussions on both sides of that about because it was not common for a crucified victim to be let off the cross, because that's part of the punishment, especially in that culture. Your death and your burial is almost just as important as your life. So, but then there's other good arguments as to why Jesus would have been let off the cross. And then if he would be let off the cross, would he have then been given a proper burial? But going back to, you mentioned the crucifixions. Yeah, Adam Calvert, I believe is his name, who we interviewed. He wrote his doctoral thesis on crucifixions during the Roman times. And he argues Jesus' crucifixion, well, first off, you see these pictures where Jesus is really high, 10 feet in the air.
Yeah.
Which is, no, his cross probably would have just been 6-7 feet tall. If, like,
Yeah.
within basic
Easy
height.
reach.
Yeah, most crosses actually had a seat on them. It would be very uncommon for a cross not to have a seat. So you're almost sitting down the whole time. So the actual images we think of crucifixions probably was not at all how Jesus was crucified. Right. You almost sat down.
Did they happen to go into why these certain ideas of crucifixion and our perceptions of things came into being and why they would have been done that way?
Just traditions evolve over time. And like we have this idea like a St. Peter being crucified upside down. That evolved through different gospel writings. Like you think of this tall cross, and actually it's the Gospel of Peter. It talks about Jesus' cross being like 30 feet high, and it actually talks. So you could say that could be where these tall cross traditions came from, because we don't have any cross artifacts, obviously, left over from that time period.
Which is strange, isn't it?
Yeah, well, because they reused the wood. Wood was expensive. Nails were expensive. That's right. But like I said, the Gospel of St. Peter has Jesus on this 30-foot talking cross, supposedly. And, could that be where this tradition came from? Or at some point in history were the crosses very large, and when they actually started writing them down, that's when they started drawing pictures.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was then the new norm. Yeah.
That seems very uncommon because wood was expensive. So why would you go out of your way to build this huge, tall cross? And when you could get 2 or 3 out of the same chunk of wood.
Or just nail them to a tree.
Yeah, which is also could have been... Well, Jesus probably wasn't nailed actually to a tree, because if he was nailed where the tradition was, there really were no trees there. It was almost like a desert. So
yeah, but outside of that, during the time period, steel and metals were raw materials back then. And so to imagine that he would be actually nailed to the cross is kind of a little out there for me. Probably tied to it, if that at all, and set out in the sun for about 3 days. I've seen that in Roman stuff as well.
Yeah, they did tie people, but like Dr. Calvert argued, we know they nailed people because we have writings, people describing this, and we also have one single artifact of an ankle bone with a nail through it, a crucifix victim. That's the only one we found so far. So, go ahead.
There was... it may be the same specimen, but there was one that they found, and I guess 30-odd years ago, they reburied all of it except for a few bones, and they just recently tested the bones and found that, there is iron and spots where it looks like they were nailed up, and so they were, whomever the skeleton belonged to was most likely a crucifixion victim.
And now... before the next show starts, let's enjoy an intermission.
I see Jesus as the product of a highly superstitious time.
I think the historical Jesus was a Jewish prophet in the line of the Old Testament prophets.
He had 2 natures. He had a human nature and a divine nature.
My opinion is that Jesus probably did not exist as a historical character.
People have seen these visions of him, and you've got to explain it somehow.
Who do they say that I am? Join us in the search for the identity of Jesus with a special episodic documentary coming in fall 2016. Find out more at facebook.com/WhoWasJesusShow.
Well, where do you stand?
I don't know.
Good call.
Yeah, go
ahead. I was just going to say, I was going to kind of say, no, you're fine. I was going to say, the details like this and the accounts, that seems to be the biggest thing people get hooked on. And I guess that's kind of where your documentary, it covers it, but it still takes that turn to where it focuses on the perception among the people that wrote the stories.
Right.
And how do you address who the people were that wrote the stories? Is there any assumptions made that they must have been real out? I mean, obviously we know some of them were real, but I'm talking about the actual canons of the Bible. That we read the accounts from the main Gospels and whatnot. How do you address that in the documentary?
That's a good question. Well, first off, even most Christians will admit the Gospels are anonymous. They're not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, obviously. They just can't be because they're written too late to be eyewitnesses. But we can learn a lot about the authors from what they're writing. Like John, for example, there's no way he could have been a first century Jew because he gets a lot of facts about Judaism wrong. Just plain and simple. If you were a Jew, you would know certain things about Passover traditions that he gets wrong. You would, like, he has the crucifixion taking place on Passover. That would never happen. He has Pilate going to the temple to talk to the high priest, and things like that just would not happen. And John should know this. Same with Mark. We can figure out a lot about Mark's education. Mark was a very educated person, but he was very poor about Jewish traditions. Like he's the one who says, the whole Barabbas story, that Pilate let Barabbas.
So he's a non-practicing Jew.
but Mark claims this was an annual tradition. It wasn't an annual tradition. There was no record of Pilate or any Romans ever releasing a prisoner over Passover. And in fact, it would have been illegal to do. And Pilate probably would have gotten in big trouble for that. So the fact that Mark says it's an annual tradition shows he has no concept of, or let me rephrase that. He shows he either has a different reason for putting it in, or he doesn't understand the law of the time.
So maybe he was trying to go for a good embellishment and it kind of went awry.
I think, if you ask me, I personally think it's because he's writing down stories, and that's one of the stories that was floating about Jesus.
Ah, I see. Yeah,
I've also heard the theory that it was written that way so to put the Romans in a better light because they were trying to appeal to a Roman audience.
Well, yeah, obviously, because the Jews are the bad guys. Because Caiaphas really wasn't a bad guy historically. Caiaphas was very well liked by his people. But you read the Gospels, and it seems like no one likes Caiaphas. He's the bad guy. Pilate, if you read Josephus and Pliny the Younger, Pilate was a horrible person to the Jews. He wouldn't think twice about crucifying somebody like Jesus. But if you read the Gospels, it's the complete opposite.
Sounds like propaganda. What? Yeah. What? Propaganda in the Bible? No.
What an exposure, man. This is great.
I declare shenanigans. We need mangina. Oh, my gosh. Shenanigans.
Is that the safe word?
Propaganda?
Adam, get on the desk, man.
That's
get on the desk.
That means there's such a thing as mangina. It's all good. Oh, my gosh. Oh my goodness, propaganda, no way. I'm just floored.
Yeah, you'll have that in the Gospels.
So, I mean, did they kind of address the idea of propaganda and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Bart Ehrman talks a lot about that in his writings. That is what makes the historical Jesus study so hard, is because you have to find a way to get past that. Use this, the criteria of embarrassment, the criteria of dissimilarity to try and figure out, is this something that benefited the audience they were writing to, or is this something that they had to put in there because the tradition was so strong? Like the baptism with John the Baptist. That seems like something that the authors or the Christians at the time would want to get rid of, and you kind of see that throughout writings, but it's still there.
Sounds like First Church's practice of Bayes' law. I mean, what the hell? That's crazy.
Does anybody talk about the fact that the Last Supper, the bread and the wine, that wouldn't have been a ritual that Jews would have saw as meaningful?
The Last Supper is a really complicated issue.
Yeah, that's another issue in itself. I mean, we're talking about cannibalistic rituals here, man.
Yeah, did it originate with Paul? Or did Mark steal it from Paul? No one really knows where it came from. Paul claims he got it from a vision of Jesus in Paul's writings, if you trust that. Paul predates Mark, but Mark probably never had access to Paul's writings. So where did Mark get it from? Things like that. And then you're right. It bears some similarities to other pagan rituals at the time. So it wouldn't be that foreign that Paul would be familiar with this. But why all of a sudden now is it a Christian tradition? And why was Paul trying to squeeze it into Christianity? That's the $1 million question.
Well, I mean, you got to think back then there was still probably some Babylonian bullshit coming around, some Incan stuff on the other side of the continent.
Zoroastrians and the Egyptians.
Well, if you see a black Madonna in Italy, odds are that statue predates Christianity. No, it was some there. I forget the name of, but no. There were certain cults that were non-Christian that worshipped a black goddess, a dark-skinned goddess, and when the Catholic Church began starting up, they just appropriated those and says, "Oh no, you think this is Ishtar or whomever it was? It's really the Madonna."
Yeah, and that again, it brings about that bigger question. Obviously, it sounds like this documentary is going to be very well rounded, showing both sides of the extremes on thought. I'm assuming you've got a strong lineup. It looks like of mythicists. Not necessarily in favor, but they recognize what mythicism is. It sounds like it's a really well-rounded view. And again, like you said, they're trying to understand the mindset of the followers. Now, when we say followers, we're talking about the first church fathers, right? The ones who wrote this stuff on behalf of the apostles of Christ, I guess?
You could word it like that again. It depends who you consider the first followers.
Exactly.
Like Paul, would you consider Paul a first follower of Jesus? Robert Price debates Paul existed. Richard Carrier doesn't. David Fitzgerald doesn't. But Price is very fringe on, even for mythicists, that Paul didn't exist. But that, again, so if Paul didn't exist, then who's the first follower of Jesus? Was it Marcion? Was it Ignatius? Who was it then? And you have to kind of go back and figure out, okay, where did these traditions start? I think obviously the traditions of Jesus had to predate the 2nd century, just because some of them are so stuff that just, the Christology just isn't evolved. By the time we get to John, Jesus is this holy super deity, but in Mark he's not even a deity. I don't think Mark doesn't think Jesus is a god.
Not really, not at all.
There's some. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we have some evidence from around that time of people worshiping not necessarily Christ, but a Christ-like figure who isn't a deity, but you get in the whole thing with Gnosticism and whether or not, and then Manichaeism and all that, and those traditions build on other beliefs that people had at the time.
And that also brings about the other argument of, are we talking about magical Jesus? Mortal Jesus? And I don't know how they cover that, how they work that in. Do they even address the miracles at all? Or are they still just...
When you talk about magical Jesus, you just mean like the Jesus...
Miracle-working Jesus. Yeah, the miracle Jesus, the magical Jesus. I call it magic Jesus and mortal Jesus. You've got two different Jesuses in my view. If you ask me, did magical Jesus exist, the Jesus with all the miracle working, I'd say hell no. If you ask me, could a guy have run around and inspired people, maybe pulled a couple common, tricks and whatever with the whole wine and water thing, possible.
You totally forgot Republican Jesus.
All that too. Totally forgot about Republican Jesus.
I think the good scholars would say, you can't know if Jesus was God or was the Son of God, but you can try to figure out if he claimed he was the Son of God and that's the difference. There's the difference between the theological Jesus and the historical Jesus. Dale Martin and James McGrath claim to be Christians who believe in the Trinity, who obviously think Jesus is God, but they would not say Jesus claimed to be God. They wouldn't even say Jesus was resurrected historically. So they somehow, in their minds, and I don't know how, separate that. I talked to James McGrath for 2 to 3 hours about the resurrection of Jesus and how Jesus probably was buried in a mass grave, and when his disciples had a vision of him, they just saw someone in a distance on a hill, and that's what they thought of Jesus. But he's a born-again Christian. So they separate that theological, like you said, that magic Jesus who rose from the dead, but also understand the historical Jesus wasn't that guy.
Because, see, it's like me, I'm personally on the fence as far as one individual compromising this character that did so much stuff and caused a political movement. I think he was kind of a lame duck president, in my opinion. I mean, he had to have... at one point, he's like hiding outside of town to do his messages. But you look at all of this, and I'm thinking, it's kind of like that whole Robin Hood thing where it's like eventually a moniker kind of stuck to certain types of individuals of political ideals and movements. And I kind of think, maybe it's kind of like a bunch of movements and people and incidents rolled into one at some point, I don't know. I just at this point, I think it's one of those things people need to say, I don't know. I think is where they need to be okay with it at some point. It's one of those things you are not going to know. Just like Robin Hood. I don't know. There's no way to know for sure. Ever.
That's pretty much where I've been the whole time is, I don't know, and I didn't really care because I'm totally happy with going with the majority of the experts. Like, atheists and stuff want to say you got to go with the consensus of scientists, and fine. But when you come to the historical Jesus, the overwhelming consensus of historians think that there was a historical Jesus. So I'm totally fine with believing that, and I don't care whether there was or not, but if there was, I can believe that, but I'm not going to give any weight to he was this magical guy doing miracles and all this shit.
It's like a catfish story, and a catfish kept getting bigger and bigger every time they pulled it out of the water.
Yeah, it's like the Abraham Lincoln vampire hunter movie. I'm totally fine with Abraham Lincoln being a real dude, but I'm not going to accept that he was a vampire hunter.
Well, I was just going to say, and nobody goes along with the idea, or, I mean, you have a god like, say, Zeus, people will say, well, yeah, he may have been inspired by somebody, but we'll never be able to know who that individual was, and they don't focus on that.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Out of everybody you've talked to, historians of all stripes, what would you say is the percentage of people who believe that Jesus was a historical figure versus mythicists?
There are only actual mythicists who hold the position of Jesus being a celestial figure and saying Jesus actually did not exist. There are two that I know of on the planet. Now, there are agnostics like Hector Avalos who doesn't hold the Richard Carrier, Robert Price position, but says, I don't know, and we probably don't have enough evidence to know either way. But as far as like full mythicists, there's really Price and Carrier. The rest would probably be, and that's even then a handful, maybe 10, I could think of off the top of my head, who hold the agnostic position.
So probably 98% of historians think that Jesus was a real guy, probably?
Yeah, they would say the most parsimonious or plausible would say, yeah, Jesus most likely existed.
Well, with that much of a consensus, wouldn't it be irresponsible for somebody who's not that well studied to doubt that? Because that's as conclusive of a consensus as you're going to get in anything. I mean, there's, like with evolution and the Big Bang, you got 98% that agree that it's true, and then the others are creation. Creation is whack job, right?
Are you calling Ken Ham a whack job? What kind of show?
That's being generous.
I'm going to call him that to his face on Thursday.
Well, the thing I will say, not that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, is just that from what I've heard of the people who are in the camp that, well, yes, there actually was an individual, they all seem to think, their basis seems to be, you wouldn't have these stories unless there really was somebody there, and they generally don't start from the preposition of, okay, we have these stories, let's go through line by line and see what we can, what we can verify is, if it's, if we can't document these actual events that it describes, let's document how plausible they all are. And I'm not saying anybody hasn't done that, it's just I haven't seen that. Like, in Bert Ehrman, like I said, he assumed that, well, the story at the tomb must be based on something that happened. And then when he found out that, no, the Romans didn't allow you to be put in a tomb, then he changed his perspective on it. And it's, I'm wondering, well, what else, when he looked at the New Testament books, did he say, well, something like this had to have happened or it wouldn't have been written down? it's. I mean, if you're going to say, well, these stories have to be true because they're written down, then you got to say, well, there's truth to Spider-Man because that's written down.
There may be some legends that were passed down and then thrown into a book, and it seems like that seems to be more the issue than anything else.
Are there any serious scholars that actually say that we have to think Jesus is real because it was written down, though? Does anybody with any kind of credentials or credibility say that? That sounds like a straw man.
The argument more goes along the lines of, again, the history doesn't deal with absolutes just like science, obviously. It deals with what most likely happened. Jesus most likely did not rise from the dead. But again, we're dealing with, takes, for example, James, the brother of the Lord passage that Carrier argues is not talking about actual brother of Jesus. Paul says he met this guy named James, brother of Jesus. Now, Richard Carrier argues Paul is just talking about a generic James guy, and he's just calling him brother, like, Christians call each other brother nowadays. But he never calls anyone else the brother of Jesus. He just calls this one guy. And he's going, in Galatians, he says, Paul, I met Cephas, I met the 12, the apostles, and James, the brother of Jesus, and this person. He's giving a list. So Paul is making a claim. He met this guy named James, who's going around Jerusalem calling himself the brother of Jesus. So whether that's true or not, the point of it being, what's the most parsimonious, simplest answer? That Paul meant James is talking about some guy, that Paul meant James, the brother of Jesus, or randomly Paul's just calling this one guy James, my generic brother in Christ, like, Christians call each other these days. So history doesn't say, yes, for certain he meant this. And yeah, there's a chance he meant James, the generic brother of Jesus, like I am, but what's the most likely answer to this conundrum?
Well, when they look at the most simplest answer to begin with, I mean, if you have to go through this much grain of salts you've got to take, toss, keep, accept, sort through, sometimes wouldn't the most simplest answer seem like the most obvious? Was it one guy? Did all of this? Inspired this much? I think they even said Buddha's multiple people at this point.
I think the story evolved over centuries to the point. I mean, it took 300 years for them to figure out Jesus was fully God and fully man.
Or maybe even that Jesus was a sheep herder from way, way before they even started writing this shit, which means the timeline they even have is wrong.
And
holy shit.
And you also have the problem that when the Romans sacked Jerusalem in 70 CE, they burned everything. So there, any kind of documentation that would shed light on this probably ended up getting torched.
I really see Jesus as he was just one of those orally told stories between sheep herders back in the day, kind of like what you've got with the cargo cults over, in those little islands. It's mostly word of mouth stuff. It's nothing written down, and it evolved from a volcano god that walked away to find a powerful woman to be his wife. Now it's John some white guy.
I just can't do it. It's like this dude up in the sky is watching over all this while he watches everybody masturbate.
Well, that's Yahweh. That's somebody else.
Well, again, did the earliest traditions we have of Jesus say he was God? Or even, like I said, if you take Mark and take that as the earliest tradition we have in writing besides Paul, that Jesus is so simplistic and primitive compared to the others. And that's, again, another argument. If Jesus started as a celestial being who was already God, he would have to de-evolve to Mark's Christology, then evolve again over 50 years to get back to John's Christology, which is where he was to begin with. So again, it's the most parsimonious answer. Why would Jesus be a celestial being, then de-evolve to a very primitive human who could barely do miracles? Because in Mark, he messes up when he does miracles. He's not very good at it. He does this miracle where he heals a blind person and he screws up. He has to do it 2 times. So, again, and that's and I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's the method historians are using is...
Yeah, well, the message there is that Mark was probably a 18-year-old, and he was banging everything left to right,
Oh, jeez, yeah. He figured out a couple of times, oh, I can't bring somebody back to life while they're still hanging from a noose. Well, guys, it sounds like we need to watch this documentary, we need to check this out when it comes out so we can kind of get our brains ticking. It sounds like there's a lot of fresh perspectives. Did you have control over the editing, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have an editing team with me who does a really good job putting things together. But yeah, I kind of, after we do all the interviews, like we recorded all the interviews and we're still recording interviews. I have one tomorrow evening and Thursday morning before I have to go down to Cincinnati for the Ark Encounter.
Holla! See you there. See you there. Look for me in my big media sign.
Hell yeah, I'm going to be there.
And I'm doing interviews there actually with Aaron Raw and David Smalley. So.
Very nice. Very nice. Like I said, I did speak to our PR guy with Tri-State Freethinkers. They haven't decided yet if they'll let Eric's group come over. They offered to help split the cost of pizza.
Well, the fact that he charged $4,000 to fly from Pensacola, Florida to Ohio is concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's like more than first class. It doesn't make any sense.
Why wouldn't they let him chip in?
Huh?
Why wouldn't they let him chip in?
Well, because then it's an exchange for him being on our side of the fence, so he can be part of the media circus.
Oh, do we have, like, some spots blocked off that we can, like, keep people out of?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah. We got all 3 major spots for the Arking protest on July 7th. And it's good to hear. I mean, Matt's going to be there along with a bunch of other big names to discuss everything. Are you going to try and get in to sit down with Ken Ham at all?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, I did a while back. We were actually, when I was with Memory Valley Skeptics, we were the first secular podcast who did a tour of their museum, and I interviewed their molecular geneticist, Georgia Purdom. So
nice.
I
bet that was interesting.
It was fun. They took us around. It's interesting to see how nice their offices are compared to, I mean, it's like, how much money did this office cost?
God, you don't want to know. You do not want to know. If you want to know, call up my buddy Jim Helton. He's president of Tri-State Freethink. He can tell you all about it. He knows all the numbers. Doesn't he, Adam?
Yeah, he does.
It's scary. It's scary how well he knows all the numbers. All right, well, folks, when is this supposed to drop? It's called, again, Who Do They Say That I Am?
Yeah, Who Do They Say That I Am? It's supposed to drop fall of 2016. I can't give an actual release date yet because that's supposed to be released next month. So just fall of 2016. We'll put the release date on our Twitter page and Facebook page, which is, or we're on Twitter, Who Was Jesus Show, and Facebook, Who Was Jesus Show. And like I said, it's produced by NPR WISO out of Yellow Springs, and we're looking forward to it, to actually having another trailer released here very soon.
And it's going to be
awesome.
Bunch of different episodes, right? It's not just one documentary?
Yes, it's an episodic. It's 8 episodes, so it'll be an episodic documentary.
Bring you back on the show before then, that's for sure.
Love to be back on.
All right, guys. Well, we better cut it out of here. Let everybody go take a pee and stretch their legs. I'm sure it was a good conversation. I don't even feel tired. Oh, my. So there you have it, folks. You got Matt Kovacs. He's director of Who Do They Say That I Am? Who is Jesus? Good stuff. Check it out. Again, we will follow up. We'll have everything in the links for the podcast to go see the trailer, read up on it, check out some of the big names that Mac had the pleasure and maybe torture of interviewing.
Tucker and Adam, we appreciate y'all coming on too, man.
Hey, I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Thanks for having me on and plugging my show.
Heck yeah, you need to come crash more often, guys. It's always fun. Okay, well, you all have a good night.
All right,
thank you very much.
Hey y'all, this is Tucker from the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. And I might live in a beer can, but I ain't no inbred redneck. And if you listen to my podcast, I'm gonna learn you something. And no, I ain't talking about how to marry your cousin and not have kids with 16 fingers and stuff like that. I mean, I actually talk about real stuff and teach people where the Bible stole its stories from. So y'all give me a listen, would you? Thank you.
Now please bow your heads for the new atheist prayer. To the mortally created Father in heaven, I decided to forego your name. Your kingdom was false. Your will was non-existent on earth and even in the stories I heard of heaven. Every day I earn my family's bread. I work hard to have my wrongs forgiven, and hope I am shown compassion in return, as I show to everyone that has wronged me. I no longer let your promises lead me into irrational decisions, as I understand I only have myself to blame. Ramen.